The nightmares of natural gas fracking being documented all over America are coming soon to Alabama, brought to you by Halliburton and its real estate agent, the Federal Bureau of Land Management. That is, unless enough people get together and lodge enough political protests to stop it. The Bureau and the U.S. Forest Service are hosting a public open meeting in Montgomery April 25th. If the place is not surrounded and overwhelmed with public opposition, the lease sale could very well move forward and set up a scenario that could not only destroy forever the beauty and the environment of a national forest, it could strike a major blow to the economy of the area, especially tourism to places like Mount Cheaha State Park, DeSoto State Park, and Little River Canyon. Greg Flanders, a resident of Claiborne County for the past 40 years, is by all accounts a normal American male in his golden years. He doesn't look like or act like a radical environmentalist. He's just a well-groomed older gentleman who is retired after a career of teaching and running overseas schools. Mr. Flanders likes living out in the country surrounded by a national forest, where one can go for long walks in the woods, camp out at night by a wood fire, and put a canoe in a clean freshwater lake, and paddle until his heart rests content. But the wrinkles in his face show his stress and concern when he talks about the plan to allow fracking for natural gas on public land that could potentially destroy the place he lives and his way of life.
Well, the word around here is that the Bureau of Land Management wants to lease a third of our Talladega National Forest for oil and gas exploration, and I don't think that there's anybody who hasn't heard of hydraulic fracking. But if they do that in our national forest as they've proposed, that's what, up to 400 sites, because 4 to 5 acre gravel pads per site with pipelines and all that.
Right.
Will just destroy the beauty, even if everything else goes well.
Even if it doesn't contaminate the groundwater and the surface water, which it
right.
might
Even
very well.
if it goes as they claim it sometimes does, they have still ruined a third of the national forest because they're not going to let us on their pads.
More than 70,000 residents of the Anniston-Oxford area get their drinking water from watersheds in and around the national forest, and a number of them fish in the lakes, rivers, and streams, and hunt in the woods.
My concern is, if we have to drill for oil and gas in the Talladega National Forest, is it worth ruining our water supply? And of course, I think it's crazy.
The Southern Environmental Law Center has taken up the legal challenge as a result of our questioning on behalf of Wild South and the Natural Resources Defense Council by filing an attempt to sue last June. One big problem the people should understand is that if fracking is allowed, it's exempt from the law after the fact for any environmental or property damage it causes. Former CEO of Halliburton and Vice President under George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, had a law rammed through Congress in 2005 exempting fracking operations from legal liability in the case of health-damaging pollution as a byproduct of their operations. So if they come to Alabama and screw things up, they can't even be sued for the damage under the law. According to expert biologist Francine Hutchinson and her husband Bruce, who live right next to the national forest on the northeastern edge of the fracking zone, the fracking should not be allowed for many reasons, but chief among them is the potential to contaminate 3 major watersheds. On the southeast, Cane Creek feeds into the Tallapoosa River. On the northeast, Terrapin Creek drains into Weiss Lake, which connects to the Coosa River. On the west, Choccolocco Creek, the largest fresh watershed in the area, feeds all of Anniston and Oxford and drains into the Tallapoosa River. While the corporations and the oil and gas lobby claims fracking is safe, the people of Alabama should be aware of problems discovered in other states. From Pennsylvania and Colorado to Wyoming and Louisiana, fracking has caused problems. In New York, policymakers have banned the practice, and the people of West Virginia are also up in arms.
But we've got to get organized enough to say no more raping of our public lands for the profit of the oil and gas industry, in my opinion. This is just outrageous. However, the unfortunate thing is that it's not going to be science. It's not going to be the endangered species and the threat to the environment. It's not going to be the threat to our water or all of the logic. It's going to be enough political pressure to convince the powers that be to stand up to the oil and gas industry and say, hey folks, we're not going to do this because I'll lose my job.
Right.
Some experts are now working to show how fracking may also cause earthquakes and contributes to climate change due to global warming from the burning of fossil fuels for energy.
I mean, ultimately, everyone knows that's working on this fight that natural gas is a dirty, dangerous fossil fuel, period. And the decision that we're trying to shift public perception is to get them to understand that it's a dirty, dangerous fossil fuel. And then also to really refocus back on the energy future that we want in clean renewables and energy efficiency. Areas that have not been drilled yet, they should not be drilled. So that's kind of like, that's the line in the sand, is we're saying, if it's not drilled yet, this is, we should not be using our public lands in this way.
Then there's the tourism economy to consider. State and local governments, chambers of commerce, conservation groups, and concerned citizens in Alabama have been working to set up a system of birding trails to attract tourism related to the growing practice of bird watching. What impact will fracking have on that?
I found out that most of the jobs that are supposedly created don't really benefit the community. Most of the jobs required to operate a well takes very few. Most of them are in the creation of a well, and most of those are done by teams of guys that travel around the country. Maybe they're in North Dakota right now. Maybe they'll be in New Mexico in a couple of years. But they'll come, they'll clear the land, they'll build a well, and they'll move on. So those jobs aren't going to benefit us.
We are an ecological destination for tourism, and that's another really, really good point, that if we've got to drill in the Talladega National Forest, and I don't think we do, is there any way to keep all of our children and grandchildren's birthright from going to the oil and gas industry? The money is not going to make it worthwhile for us.